Okay, everybody. So I'm representing Dr. Huber. He's a close friend. We've worked together for a long time. Um, One reason I like working with him is because anything GMAT or test related, he is really the preeminent expert. What you may not know is that him and I travel and we're related. We're acquainted with the GMAT staff. So when the GMAT has an event or when they have some changes, we usually travel together and we work with the people who write the GMAT. So they know us and we've given them advice, and so it's been a good relationship here. So one of the things we're going to discuss here is what's the better test, GRE or GMAT? And at the same time, we're going to discuss what's the better approach, Masters of Management or Finance. These are questions we get all the time, so we can tell you guys about exactly what we do. We represent the MBA Center, which is the heritage is, of course, MBA. Since then, it's much, much broader. It's masters, it's business education of all sorts, including tests, including admissions. Again, we work with admissions people closely. The decision makers, they know us. We work together. We can ask questions specifically about your profile, ask it directly to the school. We have a long track record of sending people here. But one of the important considerations is absolutely the GMAT here. Okay, that's me in the middle. Yeah. So what you might not know is that the GMAT is about 50 years old, and the first revolutionary change occurred last year, and it was the focus release. So there was rather a significant difference here. There's now 3 parts instead of 2. The test takes just over 2 hours, so it was shortened. There's only 64 questions in total, which is very few for a high stakes test. And it's high level. It's a high level test in mathematics, although the math is not necessarily high level. It's high school math from when you were probably 16, but it's done under time pressure. Then it's assuming proficiency of English. There's verbal reasoning. And the new addition was data insights, and there are different graphs and different visual type of displays, and you have to then answer questions based on that information. So it's the same scoring with between 200 and 800. The only difference is that there's a 5 on the end, and that distinguishes it from the GMAT Classic, which is no longer possible to take. And it's $300, which is, of course, something that we try not to take twice. And by the way, we use our mocks, so we know along the way your level here. Average preparation time is, in my experience, somewhere in the neighborhood of 100 hours of test preparation time. Not with us, but just in general. You can take it all year round. You have 2 options. You can go to the test center, or you can take it online. And both are acceptable options. The test center has to take responsibility for tech risk, computer problems, and you have to bear that if you do it on your own. It takes 7 days to get the score, 7 business days. You can send the scores to 5 business schools for free, or they charge you, and they charge you to move the test and to do things. So you try not to. It's a little bit like travel, where you try not to take any extra changes or move anything. Now, the GRE has also changed here. It's down to about 2 hours, was significantly reduced. You've got 3 sections as well, but only 2 of them count. It's verbal reasoning, and which is just the verbal part, and the quant. And what is the difference? It's made by the same company that makes the TOEFL, so the look and feel might feel familiar to you. It's a little bit faster. You have a little less time. The questions are, some people consider the math a bit easier. The truth is, these tests are 80% the same. So I don't know if it really matters which one you take, but you should just decide on one and then don't look back, because you can always switch the test. If you've studied for the GRE and you decide, there's a lot of vocabulary, I don't know if it's best for me, it's not too late to switch to the GMAT, because 80 to 90% of what you studied will be relevant. And all the same things are there. Problem solving, data interpretation, algebra, reading comprehension, critical reasoning are all exactly the same. Scoring is a little different. It's 130 to 170. It goes in 1 points. The writing is given at 0 to 6, but it doesn't affect the overall score here. The schools are looking at percentiles. So if you look at your score, they're looking for candidates to be in the 70th or 80th percentile in general is what the schools are looking for. And you can take it, again, all year around at test centers or online. In this sense, it's often the same test center as GMAT. It's slightly cheaper. Fair in Switzerland, where I'm calling from, I think it's more than that. It's in francs. Right, and the score reporting is actually pretty straightforward. So to summarize, made by the same company as the TOEFL, it competes against the GMAT. It's growing faster. It's more widespread. I think there's about 1 million taken per year. GMAT is about 200,000. Why is it more? Because every graduate student going into competitive schools probably will take the GRE. So it's not only business, it's more generalized. Now, we're going to discuss a few of the Masters of Management programs. The thing is here, Master of Management is a lot of people ask us what's the best. You see here, this is just some of the highly ranked schools. Notice that the GMAT and the GRE are not obligatory. Now, they appreciate it. If you've taken it, you can add it to your application. It adds weight on the score. But many of the clientele we have say, I'm not taking it. What can we do? And these are examples of schools, very good schools, in fact, that have good Masters of Management programs that will judge you based on your grades and other things and not primarily on a standard test here. For Masters of Finance, the list is shorter of schools that will accept an application without GMAT. The Master of Finance tends to be more competitive, and the GMAT average tends to be higher. And for example, you have, say, London Business School, the Masters of Management. I would say it's possible to get in with a GMAT in about the low 600s, whereas in the Master of Finance, you need something more closer to 700, if not over. This is a list of schools that are of good reputation where it is possible to get in without it. Having said that, with MIT is a good example. It's the #1 university in the world. I personally don't know of a case of anyone who's gotten in without GMAT. That doesn't mean it doesn't exist, but I'm just saying that that the other issue is if you didn't do as well as you hoped in school, it's probably in your interest to take the GMAT or the GRE and then prove that you're good at math if you have a grade that's below what you expected. But every other school on the list here, we have IE, they have their own test. We have EdHeg, Warwick, Rotterdam. These are examples here. But finance tends to be moderately more competitive. A recent strategy we've been using is we're applying to the good Master of Management schools, and then the candidates are taking concentrations more in finance as managers. That's a good workaround. Many of the people whose profile wants to be in private equity or venture capital, they do this. And the argument is that these type of businesses, there's a management component of the companies you invest in. So the job outcomes are actually pretty good from the good schools with Master of Management from a great name with exposure to finance here. Now, I didn't work with these people personally, but I could, of course, share many of my success stories here. And these are high GMATs here. Interesting that this GMAT isn't as high as the others, but he still has a very good the Master of Finance. And this is consistent. So very often people come with GMATs in this range and they say, hey, should we retake it? Well, it depends a little bit on the story. In general, to me, once your GMAT is at a threshold in around that range, I would recommend investing the extra time and resources into writing the application, making a very powerful well-written, on-point application. And just judging from the statistics I see, this would be a way to prove the validity of that theory. Whereas here we had a very, very high GMAT, 740 is huge. And he went to the MIM, and that was also amazing. And probably if I hadn't seen the stats, I would have assumed that the high GMAT went to finance, but this might be one of these private equity tracks. I don't know the person, but maybe he wanted to do that with the management component. It's a trend that I've seen also with my students as well here. Right, so in terms of what the offer is here, what can we do? Well, the first thing we could do is we're experts and we have the overview of everything that everyone is doing. So a lot of it, the starting point is the test prep, at least in my experience. And then once a relationship is built, we trust each other. We can do this in the form of group courses, video courses, through self-study material, official guides, choosing the material well, practice tests. So we know how to succeed at GMAT. Let's just put it that way. Everybody is different, but there's some things that we can say confidently. One of those is that you need to study and not outsource the problem. It's like going to the gym. If you pay the instructor to lift the weights, then you are throwing money at the problem and you probably won't get the result that you hope for. Whereas if you work with a good professional that inspires you and breaks it down into little pieces, we found that basically GMAT is a choice. You can succeed if you choose to do so. The hardest part is creating the time. And that's honestly, it's harder than actually the material. If you can create a little bit of time and endure an intense period, a difficult period, the rewards are very great here. Here's just some of the potential roadmaps here for when you want to start here. So you see that now we're sort of in January, and so it's a good time to be prepping here. And you probably want to get your applications in by Easter, get ready for the interviews, and then see. And of course, we always have the early birds coming for already next year, and already starting now, prepping. And that's kind of the problem. There's ambitious people who want to do these things. Nonetheless, you do see the components of the application, standard test, then the CV, essays, references, transcripts. Later, the interviews, because you have to be invited, so we take that on a as required basis. And this showcases kind of the timeline, the standard thing. Obviously, people have different demands and there's different things. We find that the decision cycles are shorter. So we have people even coming after Easter that want to do the September 2025. Oh, it works. We do it. Although obviously, all things being equal, it's rather better to do it in advance, like with most things in life then. So on the survey, which you'll have access to, this would be very good for us because then we can see your background. We can kind of link it to the schools that we know, look for good outcomes. And from this comes a personalized agenda here. So this would be highly in your interest. It would give us a bit of a backstory, and then we can link that to the schools in a way that makes sense, highlighting your strong points, your USPs, and the benefit that it would give not only you, but the university, and in such way, in a way, making a match between you and one of the schools here.
Nick, okay. I think Janus is joined, and Pierre is Mark with us. They're our alumni. I think they can share the experience. Maybe Janus can introduce himself and just share his experience regarding preparation.
Terrific. Okay. So anyone, thank you everyone for giving me the opportunity to present, and I hope everybody could take away something useful.
Janus, could you please unmute yourself?
Yeah.
Hello.
All right, guys. Hello. How are you doing? I hope everyone is well. Hubert has asked me to be here today for a few minutes to talk about my experience with him. So I'll give you a quick background about myself, and then happy to take, if there are any questions, happy to take them. So I'm 25 years old now, and I would say I started my journey with Hubert approximately 4 years ago when I was doing my bachelor's degree. So I started my bachelor's degree at ESCP in management. I did that for 3 years, graduated in 2021. Then I did my civil service in Austria, which is mandatory there. And during that time, I was working with Hubert to get into, a good master's program. And I would say during that time, so I applied to a few different schools, and in the end got into London Business School, also in big parts thanks to Hubert, I would say, because it was a big help for me. Did London Business School for a year, and I work in London since 1.5 years in investment banking. So it's like my background. And maybe quickly to how Hubert helped me. So I would say it's not when you apply for the first time for these type of things, it's not super straightforward, like which universities to apply to, what are the programs. Every university requires like a different, I would say, personal statement or CV or preparation, and every university has different interviews, etc. And having someone on your side that helps you with the different personal statements, it helps you, with your story and to adjust them to each and every single university is, of course, for one, very helpful, and of course helps also with time management. So for me, I was handling on the one hand side, doing the GMAT, doing applications for business schools, finishing my bachelor's degree, and also working during the civil service. So there's a lot of things coming together. And if there is a person, that helps you give yourself back some time and really tells you this is what you need to be doing for each school, I think is very important. And I would say now I only work since 1.5 years, but what I've learned is that there's always one job that you can apply to, or the next job that you can apply to. There are jobs like, it's for example, in finance, so many jobs in London, right? But you only have one chance to, do it right for business school. So it's going to be a door opener for you in the end. And I think it's a very important thing to do. It needs to be taken seriously. And I think you should be taking every help that you can get.
Thank you, Janus. Pierre, Mark, how about you?
Yes. Hello, everyone. Hope you're doing well. It's interesting to see Yunus again because we're in school together at ESCP. We're doing the bachelor together. Hubert worked with him, worked with me. It's interesting to see where Yunus is now because I was up to yesterday in London for meetings with potential companies there. For me, I also met Hubert about 4 years ago, towards the end of my bachelor at ESCP Business School. I had a lot of work experience in the financial services industry. I took a gap year where I worked in audit at EY before applying for my master's. I did a Master of Science in Management at Georgetown University in the US. A very amazing opportunity, especially since Georgetown is a really well-known school in the US, but it's not really one that stuck out to me to consider applying to. It was Hubert that told me to look into that direction, and I'm very thankful that he was there to kind of guide me because there were other opportunities in Europe, but I wasn't very interested in the schools. So without his help to allow me even to broaden my perspective as to what's available in terms of education and universities one can attend, that's one of the areas in which he can help students. Most of the things Yunus has said, I really agree with him on. Some specific examples regarding working with Hubert on the GMAT or the GRE, because he did tell me that it was a trend that he was seeing depending on GRE or GMAT for certain schools. But there's a certain neuroplasticity that you need to develop to really succeed at those exams. Nicholas mentioned that it's not high-level maths. The English, most of the people applying have a good level of English, but even if you feel like you're bilingual, you need to drill the responses. You need to do it long enough with someone guiding you so you can memorize the mnemotechniques to be able to perform at a high level. Of course, when I passed the GMAT, it was before the focus, so that's probably changed, but practicing with people as knowledgeable about the GMAT as Nicholas or Hubert will definitely help improve your application and your chances. And all the help they also give you with their personal statements, with the essays, training you for the interviews, that's beyond just the GMAT aid that they can give you. They can really perfect your application so you can get into the schools you want for your career in the future.
Okay, thank you. Nick, maybe you can just tell us more about difference between GRE and GMAT, and maybe Pierre and Janusz can reply which test they choose by the end and what was the difference between.
Yes, happy to say. So, I mean, I think there's much more in common than difference. When we say there's different, it's like as if we're applying to two tests, but actually the material is much more the same. I would say, like, it's a common question we have. So like there's a certain profile of test taker that I would send to do GRE. And that type of person is usually a native speaker that studied in the humanities. Like recently I had a young lady who had done sustainability, and she hadn't touched math in a long time. And so we sent her to do the GRE. We recommended that. Now, very recently, this fall, I worked with a young man, a Swiss consultant, and he had studied at LSE. And I told him, well, in that case, it's social science based. Let's do the GRE. And in hindsight, I'm really not sure it was easier because he had to learn about 500 vocabulary words. You know, he just didn't have as good as a vocabulary as a native speaker would have. So that's a case where it required some extra work. On the other hand, I do think that the math is probably a little bit easier, but the time pressure is a little bit greater. You know, we could talk a long time about the finite differences because I've been teaching these tests a long time. So I think if you're me and you test them all the time, you start to think, oh, it's much different. But if you're you and just getting started, my advice is just choose one and don't look back. Business schools are actually expecting GMAT. So even though they don't mention this, I kind of think in the back of my head that if you're submitting GRE to a business school, they might be thinking a little bit, why is he doing that? Is he trying to take the easy route? So that's always a little bit of a bias that I did. So in fact, for me personally, I find that there's better preparation material for GMAT, and the mock tests are more on point. So if I had a blank check, that's probably the direction I would go. Now, the new section is indeed a bit of a black box because we're still creating material for it. However, this was more true with the first iteration. Now that the test has been live for a year, I mean, at this point, it's pretty well known. And honestly, the new test is probably the most intuitive to people who are students. You know, this is the type of work you're actually doing, and that's why the GMAT put it in. Guys, I could talk a long time about this, but I'd rather answer specific questions. I think at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. If one isn't working, you can always switch. A typical constellation is start with GMAT. If the math is too hard or it's not working for you or you're stuck, switch to GRE. And you don't lose anything. You're still like up to date. What I would avoid doing is taking both. That's what I would avoid doing. But at a certain point, you just have to take and go, and they cover 80-90% of the same material.
Okay, thank you. And how about you guys? Janusz?
Yeah, I'll go for it if you want to. You did the GRE, did I understand that correctly?
I did have a look at the GRE. For me, one of the personal experiences I had, Yunus, I'll let you tell us if you did it online or in person. So I took the GMAT online, and I think it depends. It depends on the data available if you have a test close to you, but online wasn't really the best experience for me. You know, you're so much more likely to have issues with your internet connection. That I was being interrupted by the proctor that would ask me to lower my screen to see what I was writing, but I couldn't write and show my table at the same time. It's just a message online. I think you would take out a bit headache if you do it in person. That's the only personal experience I can give you regarding the GMAT. Otherwise, GRE does have a reputation of being slightly easier for maths, but if you're targeting the high-level schools, I would say it's good to do the GMAT to show your level. Of course, Nicholas talked about it. He has much more experience with saying this, but that's what I can tell about my personal experience, the people I've met in the schools I attended, and what their backgrounds were.
No, I agree. So in the end, I think Nicholas is the most experienced here, right? He speaks to the most students, and in my experience, people usually take the GMAT. However, so same that I. However, I do have a very recent example where someone took the GRE, and so I spoke a lot with him also during his application, etc. Did the GRE and got also into London Business School. So in the end of the day, I guess you have examples for both. Mostly people take the GMAT, but I'm sure GRE is also very good to do. Maybe should we take some questions from the people in the chat, if there are any for the two of us?
Yeah, maybe some students have got some questions. We have Marion. Do you have any questions? Zineb or Theobald? If anyone has got any questions, you can ask now. Or you can message in chat. We are ready to reply. I think no one wants to talk. Maybe you just give some advice to students, because they're now preparing for the GMAT or GRE, and they're preparing for PTI. Maybe you just can give some tips to them.
You want to start?
Well, my advice is going to be kind of what I said earlier. It's not the most engaging advice I can give you. Just it's about repetition. You need to just get into your mind what. Of course, there's quant. Like I said, I don't know for focus GMAT, but when I did it, it was you knew kind of big areas of questions you could get with permutations, with certain types of probabilities, certain statistics. So you need to train yourselves to be able to very quickly identify what type of question you're going to be asked. I even talked to some people who had 730 on the GMAT, and they said that the way they were trained is that they knew they were lacking more with probability questions, that they would do better on some other types. So even with that knowledge, they would tend to skip the questions that they were a bit unsure about, needing too much time to complete them. So they had more time for the ones they knew they were stronger on. And I think that's an important strategy to maybe have. Nicholas or Hubert would be able to really identify where your pain points are and how to improve them, so you can quickly ascertain how much time to allocate for questions, because you need to be quick. So drilling down, lots of practice, that's the most important. And don't get hung up on considering the GMAT being the only value to your application. I know Yunus and myself, I mean, I expect Yunus, but when I applied to my master's in the US, I know that the fact that I did ESCP for American universities, they're very interested in the fact that we lived, studied, worked in multiple countries, London, Madrid, Berlin, Paris. It's not just the GMAT. There's also other sites that Nicholas and Hubert can help you put forward in your application so that you can get in. I'm not saying it's not important, so practice that, and also create a good narrative to get the schools to understand your story and how you add value to them.
Yeah, also I'm happy to give some high-level advice. So again, when I was doing these processes, it's been 2 or 3 years or so, it's very important to, I think, manage your time. And I think it's I guess the most important point to take away from today's session, given you guys may or may not be working together with Hubert. But you have so many different things going on at the same time that having someone that, again, helps you a little bit to prioritize, should we be doing a personal statement today? Should you be doing the GMAT practice? Where are you with the GMAT and or the GRE? What should you be working on specifically? Don't forget about your personal life as well. You want to see your friends, your girlfriend, boyfriend, whatever it is, your family. Maybe you are also working at the same time, right? So there are lots of things going on at the same time. It will always be like this. Also during your master's degree or during work, you will have different types of obligations, and take this as an opportunity to learn how to manage your time properly. And I will also say this, like, these are opportunities where you meet people that already went through this process, and you can then reach out to us afterwards as well. So it's very nice that you guys are already here, right? You can reach out to us afterwards as well. Let's say you are in a process for university where either Pierre-Marc or myself have been, so we have a phone call, 15, 20 minutes, and we try to give you some tips about the process, or maybe we know someone that did the university that you're applying to or working towards. It's going to be the same thing for your job as well. So think long term. These are long-term connections for you. You will do the master's degree, and then you will also work at some point. Imagine you want to go into finance, and it would be good that you have either my or Pierre-Marc's contact, because we did the processes, and you can speak up. And again, so the reason why I said before, like, you guys should ask some questions. This is high-level advice, but I mean, we're happy to also give you tailored advice to your specific current situation. But I mean, if you don't want to do that now, again, happy for you guys to reach out afterwards as well.
Yeah, I actually really like the advice you guys gave. It's very sensible and practical. I can't really say anything better than that. That maybe to add something is begin early, because if we looked at the attributes and the components needed for the application, probably the biggest mistake is to wait and do the other things first and then do the GMAT last. People underestimate it, and in fact, the GMAT is the door opener. Like, if your GMAT is terrible, you probably won't get your essays read. So unfortunately, you risk working for nothing. So I would say invert the order. Start with a standard test. Start early. And then you won't be in one of these awful time pressure situations. And try and make it fun. Try and gamify it. There's lots of good resources out there. I mean, working with us, it's fun, actually. We learn things, we laugh. It's not torture to have to study with us. If you don't want to study with us, and a lot of people just go on their own, there's a lot of good resources too, in terms of online. Actually, you have to find what's worked for you as a student. The fact that you're even aspiring to do a high-level master's degree means that you have a strategy. You can read, you can take tests, you can enter questions, you can budget your time. We don't have to teach that to you. You guys are going to graduate school, which is pretty much an all-star team of university. So what works for you? What type of learner are you? So be a little self-reflective. Are you a crammer? Are you a morning person? I mean, a lot of these sort of things get left out. Are you better in spurts? Like I use for my lessons, I tend to go for these 2-hour blocks because I think they're really the most efficient. I tend to do them not too late at night, but it depends on the learner. So these are just the kind of common sense things that you guys have used up until now, that you should just go back to your roots. Like, what worked for you up until now? Did you use index cards? Did you use Quizlet? Did you use Learn by Doing? Are you a theoretical person? I mean, these are all the things that we work with the candidate and we find out pretty quickly. I would say with all the candidates I work with, probably the advice that worked for everybody is more learn by doing and less theory. I made a video of my site that said the biggest mistakes of GMAT prep, and number one was too much theory. So I have people that show up and they have like 5 textbooks and they're like, you know what? I'll come to you in 3 months as soon as I reread my high school grammar book and algebra book. And I'm just thinking, don't expect it to make a damn bit of difference doing that stuff. Because GMAT has its own logic that I think the gentleman already hinted at, and GRE too, by the way. If you want to do something today that will help you, read in English. Read the Financial Times or The Economist and try and read it fast, because this will give you a knowledge advantage when you get to business school, and it'll put you in contact with these succinct, well-written articles, which is the type of thing. And if those things don't interest you at all, well, unfortunately, you might want to rethink your career choice is one thing. But if you want to start today, and you want to do it for free, then just use the BBC and do the BBC Business, and that's free, and you get a lot of news. FT Economist, and then just start to solve simple problems. If you get the official GMAT guides, they're in order of hard to easy. So the first 50 questions are probably more on the easy side. There's nothing stopping you from just starting to do it, see how you feel, revive it, make it fun, reward yourself, join a group. I mean, don't just grind away and beat your head against the wall. Reach out, get help before you need it. That's probably the biggest tip I can say.
And also, I saw in the chat that Luna is asking if one should be including scores, if they're high or low. I can't assess if this is the GRE score. I'm not sure you can get around.
I think she's asking because she's applying to the school without, which is not required GMAT, LSC, or Imperial, something like that. But she's asking if she need to put like 311 because it's a little bit low. And she's asking if she need to repass it or just can put it like that.
Well, sorry, what's the score? 311?
311 or GRE.
For GRE? Wow, that's a tricky one. I mean, we'd have to look at the profile here. That's actually a decent score. It's not terrible. We'd look at there. The point is, if the percentile in one section is much below 50%, it's probably going to hurt you. Yeah. What we would do is look at the grades. If you have a high GPA, then probably don't show it. The point is, if you're sitting on a 311 though, and you're willing to retake it, it's positive that you could improve. Positive. That's a great score. It's a great basis. You know what you're doing. I mean, we could raise that 30 points, you know, almost without even learning anything else, just by going about the test in a bit more sensible way. So if you haven't taken a course and you've done that on your own, that's impressive. We get a lot of people with these marginal scores. They show up to get the last mile, and a lot of times we see a big jump just getting in our face and working together. You might be going about something in an inefficient way, or you might be like distracted by something. So very typical thing. Wow, it's a tricky one though. I'd have to look at the CV, see the grade, see some of the internships or whatever. Assuming they're all very good, then for LSE it shouldn't matter, and it would probably be worth it to just apply without it.
Thank you. I think we don't have any more questions. And thank you so much, Nick. Thank you so much, Janusz, and thank you so much, Pierre, Mark, for joining us today.
Great to be here, guys. Thanks to the volunteers. You guys are there. The advice was superb. I hope everyone listened to them. What I said is just from experience, but they were the more meaningful tips came from your peers. As always, that'll be the same business school. Right, guys?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thanks, guys, again for your time here.
Yeah, thanks. Feel free to reach out if you have specific questions.